me? All right, get your big stick out to poke me. Welcome to everyone that would be viewing today. This is the City of Norwood Planning Commission, August 4th, 2021. The time is 3:34. I have a roll call of the people present.
Chairman Murphy,
Present.
Mayor Snyder,
Present.
Mrs. Kelly,
Present.
Mrs. Sickinger.
Absent. Okay, there is no old business, but I would like to welcome Mike Skelly, the city of Norwood. Mike's agreed to be our community development director, brings years of experience in development, planning, and zoning. Just to mention a few, I look forward to seeing much more progress in working with Mike. New business. Neither item on our agenda today is a public hearing. The Planning Commission will make the final approval of what we discussed today. A decision in the form of a complete motion would be either to approve as is with conditions, approve with changes, or deny for a specific reason. Time now is 3:42.
I got 3:43.
3:43. Okay, the first item on the agenda is Ryan Hart. Is Ryan here today?
No.
Well, Ryan was representing Viox and Viox, so Nick is here representing PLK, and that will work.
Okay, we have Nick Langenfelser here, representing PLK in the Factory 52 development, requesting the Planning Commission review and make a determination of the proposed lot split as described in attachments. Plat of survey, division of the Playing Card Partners LLC, dated 7/1/21, illustrates 4 proposed lots on the entire plot there. Section Plot A is 10.76 acres, B is 2.26 acres, C is 5.64 acres, and D is 1.72 acres. Would like to make a motion that the Planning Commission, what was it, the word there's?
Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, it should be some
Approve the
discussion.
proposed lot split based on the subject to the applicant.
There should be a discussion of the application before a motion is made.
Okay. So, do we have any discussion on the proposed lot split?
Yes. Oh, I'd like for Mr. Lingenfelter to come up and maybe discuss the reasoning for the lot split and why it's set the way it is.
Thank you. Again, Nick Lingenfelter with PLK Communities. The lot split in front of you today is actually step 1 of about a 4-step process to how we're putting in all the public streets throughout our project. So because the streets are going to be done via a perpetual easement with the Port Authority, they are not legal roads. They are illegal. There's not a traditional public road in that sense. So we had to create 4 lots here. Typically, you would want lot to have frontage on a main public road, which would be a dedicated city street. But our agreement with the City of Norwood is that we will maintain the streets basically in perpetuity, and they will not be an expense directly on the city's books. So as such, it's being done via easement, so the City of Norwood does not have a financial obligation to maintain those roads. That then leads us to, well, then we have to have frontage on a main road for all parts of the development. So the 4 subdivision lots are Phase 1A and Phase 1B. 1A is what's already approved through our PUD, as well as 1B. The reason why 1A and 1B are different is because 1B will actually start about 24 to 36 months later. 1A and 1B have separate CRA agreements, which is our tax abatements. The tax abatements need to be tied to when each phase is completed. So your 2 lots in the middle, the roughly 10 acres and the just over 2 acres, is all essentially Phase 1, but it's split up because of how the tax abatements layer in. You then have what we call the office land on the highway. that is an additional parcel as well. That'll be subject to completely different agreements, has not had a final PUD, and will be coming back before the city based on the tenants and whatever their needs are. The fourth lot is roughly that triangle-sized lot that's up by the railroad tracks. That is a future developed site. We had originally called for retail. We currently have a commercial tenant looking at it. So there's a couple different options there. Again, that is exempt from any agreements that we currently have. So the 1A, 1B in the middle are tied to our CRA, and the other two parcels are future development. So in order to mirror our TIF agreement with the city as well as the Port Authority, as well as to make the public streets work, we had to put this in place. So the lot splits give us legal frontage on beach, where each address of each parcel will be on beach. And then step two, I actually wrote these down so I don't give them to you wrong. These will all go before City Council as the final development agreement. You all should have a copy of the draft development agreement completed by the city's attorney. It has been reviewed by ours as well. I believe it's about 99% done based on what I've been told. So then once the development agreement is done, we have a cooperative agreement that talks about reimbursements, who's responsible for what. And then finally, we have the TIF agreement. So once the TIF is funded, the easements become final. All of that happens over about a 30 to 45-day span. So I made sure that you all had a red map in front of you. That is the public easements of all public improvements on the site. The public improvements are essentially your sidewalks, your roads, and your curbs, and any light or anything there. PLK maintains all of the utilities, so if there's lights on those roads, they're paid for us via a master meter. Everything in there is owned and maintained by us. So these roads are essentially what we're getting to, but we have to do the lot split first because each parcel does need a legal address. I believe everyone is also supplied with, there was a letter that was sent by Mr. Skelly with some questions and concerns he had. We also then have provided a response from our council describing that this matches to what the TIF agreement has. So to give you an idea, we all know this is a pretty large project, but every Tuesday morning we have the city's attorney, our attorney, the port attorney, bond counsel. There's roughly 8 to 9 attorneys every Tuesday making sure that this is following the right paths. This is really more of a form thing that needs to be done in order to lay out everything we have agreed to. I would also note that these roads are already getting cut in. You've already been at the site. So these are things that are already laid in place. The building foundations or pads are currently there right now. It's nothing that we can really reverse course on. It's all tied to our TIF, so we don't get reimbursed if it's not done. There's a lot of things to us if the process isn't followed properly. Mr. Mayor? Any questions I can specifically?
Yeah, a big question of mine has been the maintenance obligations. Who carries those out, or who has that responsibility throughout this project? And then, of course, access to them. And you provided us with the declaration of easements and maintenance obligations, which is a draft document.
Correct.
But it does talk about grant of roadway easement, grant of utility easement, grant of temporary construction easement. I guess a question that comes to mind first and foremost for me is that declaring hereby grants and declares for the benefit of the port and the beneficiaries of the property a non-exclusive perpetual agreement or easement in and under. So I guess my concerns from the city's perspective is that we're not responsible for maintaining those roadways in the least way, shape, or form, but we also have no recourse if they are not maintained properly throughout the life of this. And not to say that PLK would let that happen, but in 25 years or 50 years down the road, how are we making sure that these streets are being maintained properly and do not end up they're essentially private property still, correct?
They are, but they're not. I mean, yes, it's a public easement on private property. So what I will say is, I mean, the Port Authority can hold us to that, and part of our bond issuance through the Port Authority make sure they are maintaining that. We also have some form of reserve, so it just like any other common HOA, that's there. You've also got your commercial tenants and what are your office tenants, so everybody pays in basically to the pot to help maintain that. they would all collectively almost have to not be funding that, and there are default mechanisms, just like any other HOA, if somebody's not following through on what they're required to do. So, I mean, if I'm an office tenant, all of a sudden the guy next to me doesn't want to pay for it, I'm gonna want to throw him in default and get it cleaned up too. So, I mean, it's in everybody's best interest to keep it maintained.
Okay, so, and then, if I may, in this agreement management obligation, maintenance, repair of roadways shall include but not limited to paving, patching, striping, sealing, sweeping, removing snow and ice, maintaining drainage,
Yep.
cleaning and removal of debris and other similar expenses. All the expenses that the city would take on for a property like this, if these are dedicated streets, are not the city's obligation. The way this is written right now, not, and I want to make it clear, not the city's obligation. But there are plans put in place for all of these actions to take place.
Correct.
Through this maintenance group. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, just like any HOA, I was reviewing our budget this morning, so we have a snow removal number, an ice number, everything is in those budgets annually.
Can I do a follow, do you guys have other questions?
I do have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, I want to say I'm new to this board, and so I am not familiar with all the history behind everything that's come before now for this property. I'm very excited about this property, but I am curious. So is, so you said in order you broke it up the way you did because of the TIF agreements. Mr. Skelly had some comments in his letter where he talked about concern over the parking being separated from the residential and the utilities being potentially separated from the properties that were on the particular lot. So I guess I'm just asking, like, is there not, like, does this have to be divided up this way, or can it be divided up so it can meet both of those, like both your need to, for your TIF agreements and have utilities and parking associated with the appropriate buildings in the lots that are being separated? Does that make sense?
So let me start with the utilities, because I understand
Okay.
your questions. The utilities as well as the parking, first off, is there a better way to separate it?
Yes.
Specifically because of the utilities and parking?
Yes.
Is that the question? So a couple of things. We are allowed to do 4 splits controlled by the city. Otherwise, it becomes major subdivision, goes to county level, and has to stop a project for 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
It is a long period. So we were trying to stay within the confines of what the city actually could do. That's the first one. Answering your global question, the best way to do this would be to make them all just public roads in their cities. But the city doesn't want the maintenance obligation. I don't blame them for not wanting the maintenance obligation. So some of this is to accommodate the not wanting the maintenance obligation and how that has to be done. Regarding how we could physically break it up, a couple things. There is no easy way to just break up a building and the associated parking with it. We're essentially building a square. So in that, you have cross parking. You've got a lot of other things that just don't work. There's just no way to split up the parking garage and make multiple garages that everybody is sharing. So if these were surface lots, we probably could, but the goal has always been to not have surface lots that look like Rookwood. It's always been to create that more village feel. So therefore, we do have shared parking. What I would also tell you is, like, for instance, the garage that's getting built along Kenilworth, that's actually a newer addition. It was a surface lot before we added a garage because there was concerns that there might not be enough parking over there. So we're basically building the infrastructure without the additional buildings. So it's in our best interest to go ahead and finish those buildings, because if we don't, we build a garage with no people to fill it all. So we also have a pretty nice abatement in phase 1B, which is part of the school district agreements. The school district wanted to encourage us to finish it, wanted to encourage us. So we get a lower abatement in phase 1, we get a better abatement in 1B. So basically keep creating density and creating more revenue for the city. So the deal is to encourage us to build more. So as far as physically breaking it up, there's just no simple way to do it. Regarding the utilities, we do stub out utilities at each pad. So as we're going through, for instance, where it says future 1B residential, there is a utility pole there already. Like, the guys are putting those in on the site because we don't ever want to rip up a road and come back and do it. So these building footprints are locked in, and we're building to those footprints, even if that building is not getting built today.
Okay.
Do you want to add to that, or?
Yes, please.
Sure. So when I guess,
Turn that mic around there, Mike.
sure.
Just toward you. It's on.
Okay, is it on? Good.
Yep.
Okay. So when the July 21st memo was prepared by myself, I had concerns looking at it, whether from a planning perspective, zoning, engineering sort of standpoint, and I approached it with the optics of, how a traditional land development or subdivision would be reviewed. This is not a traditional land development or a traditional subdivision. As you heard, there's a lot of different moving parts. I think the biggest drivers for this is the financing that's going through the tax abatement. So we have a CRA, which is divided in different portions, which I'll return to, and a TIF. The site in itself, in terms of trying to get a 20-acre site cleaned up, rehabilitated, and even if this applicant wasn't proceeding with the development, I suspect the demolition costs alone were probably approaching, $200,000-$300,000 for this site. So there's a lot of investment
10 to 20.
for the whole.
It's like $6 million in cleanup on that site.
Yeah, so it's incredible in terms of just getting it to a point that we could even find an applicant to pursue something that we would like. So the bottom line, returning to what you heard, the reason why we have 4 flagpole lots is that essentially this is more being driven by, let's say, the lawyers, bond counsel, including the ones that represent our interests, that's saying, hey, in order to protect those equitable interests, it has to be done this way. So going back to the caveat, if we were taking on the roads, if we were acquiring it, yeah, everything would be much more easy. So the concern initially was not fully understanding how it's being done and what's driving it. And sometimes, again, good planning, sometimes engineering may have to take a backseat to the finances, because otherwise this would be still sitting there in that condition. It would be still undergoing property maintenance issues and other potential nuisance concerns.
Okay.
So we did have a meeting last Friday to work out our concerns. The applicant was very forthright. We received the draft agreements, including like the description of what is going to proceed, the timing, et cetera. And that clarified a lot more and provided additional assurances. So one of the big positive things that came out of that was having that separate development agreement. So in addition to that, we had discussions with our bond counsel and lawyers as well to, alleviate some of our concerns. And
Okay, so you're satisfied with that at this point?
correct, yeah. It's one of these things like globally looking what's the positive, what's the negative. Again, I think we have to be humble in the case that, again, a developer taking on this initiative. So,
Right.
like I said, in terms of not to boast my own ego and, hey, it has to be my way because I want to see the lots configured like this, I think there's flexibility. And as you probably read in that 2-page memo, I provided 2 outs, and essentially either do it this way or through agreements. So I think obviously the applicant pursued appropriate agreements to cover our bases.
Okay. One other question I had was on the smallest lot, I think D, 1.72 acres. I don't think that Norwood specifically has like a small, like a minimum PUD. I've read somewhere that some municipalities, like the smallest PUD can be like 2 acres, and I didn't know whether like the size of that lot was of any concern to anybody.
Correct. So in Chapter 1155, we do have provisions for a minimum of 2.5 in terms of at least, and that's how it's going to be either major or minor. In this case, it's part of the overall plan. So getting back to, the concerns, et cetera, parcel D, which is, let's say, 1.72, or parcel, B just being 2.26, that is not going to be sold independently and someone independently doing something completely different. So we still have a approved final PUD for this, which is a mixed use. And as far as I know, and the applicants here, the intent is to proceed with that.
So there's a preliminary and a final. So we did a preliminary over the whole site, and then we final out each parcel. So that way, it's under the master. So it's under the 20-acre site.
Okay.
And then that 1.7 will get finaled. So you've got a preliminary plan for it right now. And then we come back to planning commission and city council before we final that piece out. Just like we would so it's not like you're creating a whole new PUD. It's part of the master already.
Okay.
So that's the one thing I'd say, well, it's already got a preliminary approved for that triangle. And then we would go get a final through the planning commission and city council based on what that use would be.
Okay.
Yeah, one, just
Go ahead, Mike.
sorry, to help you further, I don't know if it was included in the package, but Vioxx, and this was my first initial concern before I even start writing the memo, is please show me this plan in relation to how the PUD was formed. So I can quickly look through it. Okay, yeah, so it does show it, how the two mesh together, and that was, part of the concern. So I think getting back to the involvement of the lawyers, that's provided the certainty because they match the footprint of those buildings intended. So everything should work out. And I think obviously the applicant knows that if something changes significantly, they will be coming back and tweaking the design to getting the approval of both the planning commission and council.
Okay.
So,
I included that as part of your memo because those were the attachments you were talking about.
okay, thanks.
The other question I had, and it's a hot button issue all over the county, is when we talk about the way, does this change anything or have anything to do with the way you've set up the underground detention systems and stormwater runoff and all of that? Is nothing is changed by this this plot change?
Correct,
Is
nothing
that
has changed.
And all of your detention that you're putting in is all underground?
Everything is underground except for, and we might have went ahead and buried it anyway. We have a basin up by the railroad tracks. So in your top right corner, and right now, both sides by the railroad tracks are basically above ground. It's like a 3 or 4 foot swale. I will tell you the one up by the railroad tracks in the far left corner, the 1.7 acres, we got a proposal yesterday to bury it because we do have a tenant looking at that space, and if they look at that space, they're going to want to bury it so they have sufficient room to park.
And then the other part is the maintenance of those throughout the years in perpetuity is all covered under the agreement and
Yes.
within. That's not something that the city will be responsible for in the future.
Correct, and we added cleanouts. I think we spent another $20,000 to $30,000 recently to add specific cleanouts, so we have a way to access those as well. Sometimes you have that, sometimes you don't. So we went ahead and spent the additional money, so we have ways to access those and make sure we can maintain them properly.
I think you can tell my reasoning is trying to keep the city from having an expense in the future for maintaining this area. And I think much of that was completed when the Rookwood project went in. So I think we're on the right track here with where we're going, so.
Okay.
Thank you. You just want this, right?
I would make a motion that the planning commission approves the proposed lot split and subdivision based upon the information that we've received.
Do I hear a second?
Sure.
So the motion is to approve the lot
The lot
split
split.
subdivision based upon the
Correct.
application that was received.
Correct.
Second by Mrs. Kelly. Chairman Murphy, is there any other discussion?
Call the roll, please.
Chairman Murphy,
Present.
yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Schneider?
Yes. I should have said present. Just
Same
mess
question.
with John.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you.
The time is now 3:58. The second item on the agenda, Nick Langenfelser's requesting the Planning Commission consider proposed private street names The suggested names include Maverick Drive, Park Avenue, the extension thereof, Bicycle Boulevard, Morgan Way. Alternative names are Cardistry Way, Bridge State Place, Solitaire Street, Patience Place, and Russell Drive.
I'm going to withdraw that for right now.
Okay?
Thank you.
You need to call the roll on that?
Yes, sir,
Yep.
the applicant withdrew.
Okay. Communications and miscellaneous. Is there anything the commissioners or staff would like to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission at this time?
Yes, I have one thing.
Yes, sir.
We are still down, we have one member that's on vacation, and we are still short one member for the Planning Commission. I have a candidate for that. I just want to make sure the makeup of the Planning Commission is correct before we look at making that appointment. And Mrs. Town or Mr. Skelly, maybe you can help us understand the required makeup of the Planning Commission.
Planning Commission is required to have the mayor, the Director of Safety and Service, and one member from the Board of Zoning Appeals to act as a liaison between the two bodies. Other than that, you're welcome to have whomever you want, as long as they're a Norwood citizen.
Okay. And if I'm not, I think I'm correct, that we are still short a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals also.
Yes.
So those are two positions that I'll be working to get filled.
There's nothing that says you can't have two people as a liaison.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind, I suppose. Okay.
Thank you.
We do have one member absent. I would make a motion to excuse that member, and a second, please.
Second?
I wanted to second.
Chairman Murphy,
Yeah.
Mayor Steiner,
Yes?
Mrs. Kelly.
Yes.
Time is now 4:03. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Did you want this copy? Do you want the building department or something?